We have all been waiting for this to happen for the San Antonio Spurs as the bench guards, notably Stephon Castle, absolutely show out in an offensive and defensive clinic for the Spurs. But also, Zach Collins steps in to the starting center role. While a lot of people had some negative things to say about his game, him and multiple other Spurs set the exact tone that Spurs fans have been waiting to see in terms of their defense and their leveling up, not to mention the bench and depth scoring the Spurs fans know is going to be key going forward this season and will change everything for how we look at the San Antonio Spurs. We're going to get into all of that coming up on this episode of Spurs Digest. But guys, before we get into the video real quick, still, well over 85% of you watching this video are not subscribed. We're aiming for 2,000 subscribers by the end of October, and I know you guys can help us out with that because this is your home for all things San Antonio Spurs, daily news, rumors, reports, game reactions, all that stuff. So hit the button down below. It's completely free if that is of interest to you. But I want to start the video talking about our boy, Zach Collins. Now, Zach Collins, a lot of people were not super happy with his game last night, and I'll just pop up the box score so you guys can see it. Of course, he stepped into that starting role. He played 20 minutes in the absence of Victor Wembanyama, and he put up 11 points, but the problem was he was again 0 for 6 from 3, and only shot 4 for 13 from the field. However, like you saw in that opening clip, Zach Collins stepped up and was decent defensively. Zach Collins is one of those guys that, at this point now, especially after last season, Spurs fans are rightfully questioning his three-point shot. But I'm seeing way too many Spurs fans all out already saying Zach Collins does not deserve to play many roles. People are saying, give Minix Zach Collins minutes. And to be fair, Minix has been really, really good. Another 5 minutes, 3 for 3, shooting off the bench. So he's been great. But the thing with Zach Collins is I'm going to play this intro highlight again. We'll probably play this a few times throughout the video. We'll just, it's always nice to see Sochan dunk the ball. And of course, Keldon Johnson get the end one. He had a nice dunk too. But Zach Collins, again, the target of a lot of criticism. He was actually calling out Blake Wesley's great play that I will get into later. But this block here, and again, just being solid on the glass in general is kind of what we want to see from Collins. Only 2 rebounds tonight, but he was boxing out. And last season, I feel like it's easy to forget that in the minutes that he did start, even though that offensive game has just not really come to him last season. Since 2 years ago, he was a 37% three-point shooter, so he still has that in him. And again, don't forget, he's coming off shoulder injury, and he's coming back, his first game back off shoulder injury. So at the same time, I think we got to give him a little bit of a break. He had a block, he had 11 points. He was only a -1, which was not that bad compared to some other starters. And, the bench really was the difference maker in this game, and I will get into that now in a second. But I just wanted to say, shout out to Zach Collins, because even though he didn't have the best game offensively, he still looks like he's working. He still looks like he'll be able to get those minutes here. But I know a lot of you are going to agree or disagree with that. So I want to hear your thoughts on Zach Collins down below before we get into the rest of this game. Because, well, I think there's some controversial opinions. But I honestly was not impressed with his shooting percentage. But I did see those flashes that I still think he'll end up being a very, very solid big man for this team. But we're going to quickly move into the actual game recap. And I'm going to put this back up. Now, Chris Paul. There was a lot of question marks coming into this game about whether Chris Paul would, work well without Victor Wembanyama, how he would mesh with the other starters. And, well, he went out there and shot 1 for 7, but in typical Chris Paul fashion, he was not that bad defensively. He didn't get any steals or anything, but he did get 8 assists and 3 rebounds. So even in a game where Chris Paul's not shooting his best, he can still find a way to impact the game. So shout out to him, and I know those assist numbers are going to go well up with Victor Wembanyama back. But that was not the key for the Spurs in this game. And I know they gave up 120 points, but there was a really nice article that I will link down below talking about the difference maker for the Spurs in this game being defense. And 120 points, yeah, I know that doesn't really scream defensive clinic, but what does scream defensive clinic are the bench guards. And here's a quote from the article I mentioned. Pop called on Blake Wesley and Stephon Castle. Once again, they did this against Orlando, and they did it again against Utah, and this is what we've all been waiting for. Looking at these guys to come in and impact the game from the bench. Because the Spurs bench, like last season, I mean, yeah, there were some okay players on it, but at this point, that bench depth is something that we're going to really need moving forward, and these guys showed that they could do it, right? When the Spurs needed the tides to turn in their favor, it's just simply, let's put Blake Wesley and Stephon Castle in the game. 2 guys that bring incredible defensive intensity, and also now are both kind of rolling offensively, and also even on the glass. We'll get back to the box score in a second. But when you put them in, the Jazz were up 84-79 in the third. And Pop actually also had Tre Jones in there, wound up with 5 steals of his own. But those 3 guys, plus Keldon Johnson bringing the intensity, really changed the tides of this game. But to say that it's just Stephon Castle and Blake Wesley, I think is disingenuous because, again, like you have other guys showing that incredible intensity, that willingness to sacrifice on the defensive end. I know that's kind of Sochan's game in and of itself. A big part of it is his defense. But Keldon Johnson stepping up as well. And even Zach Collins, like I showed, getting that block shows that this Spurs defensive identity is starting to take it a level up. And I actually have a quote from Blake Wesley speaking on this. He said, "I've been locked in. I was at Impact training camp in Vegas all summer. I mean, training, getting my treatment, just locking in on year 3. Year 3 is a big year. That's when people elevate their game. Contract year, got new teammates. So yeah, I mean, I've been focused and locked in all summer." And that is incredibly visible. And if we look again back at the box score here, we get Tre Jones again with 6 assists and 5 steals with 10 points. Unbelievable game. 10, 6, 5, and 4 for him. Really, really great game off the bench, which is, again, just goes to what I said in the intro. Exactly what we've been waiting to see for this kind of bench mob, right? Like, this starting 5 could very well be the starting 5 during the season. You sub out Champagnie for Vassell, and you sub out Collins for Wemby, and there you go, right? Paul Barnes and Sochan. That could easily be your 1, 3, and 4 in the starting lineup, but it's that bench, right? Sandro has been amazing. I could go through every single one of these players and talk about them. Even Sissoko coming in and shooting 100% from the field. But really, it is focusing on Wesley and Castle at the moment, because they both got 19 minutes. They both shot similarly from the field, 3 for 6 and 4 for 7. Castle being 50% from 3 again, but both of them bringing that incredible defensive intensity, and Wesley really showing out on the defensive glass, which I think people don't always associate with that, with being good on the defensive end, but I think people should, because when you're good on the defensive end and you get that rebound, that's just a possession ended for the offense. In a lot of ways, it's maybe not as valuable as a steal, because that can lead to transition points more frequently, but it is incredibly valuable because it turns the tides for your team. Anyway, regardless though, those two guys stepping in and having that insane defensive intensity to follow up on that starting lineup is so valuable, again, because in that starting lineup, you have a guy like Sochan, you have a guy like Chris Paul, who can still hang with point guards. I mean, he's definitely not what he once was, but it's not that bad. But all things considered, you have Victor Wembanyama behind you, right? So your starting lineup is still going to be incredibly good defensive. We all know the splits with Victor Wembanyama on the court versus off the court when it comes to the Spurs defense. But now you go to the Spurs bench, which has been a bit of a point of contention over the past few years. You know, when the Spurs bench comes in, it's like, oh man, not really rolling that well. But when you have a guy like Tre Jones, who is of maybe lower tier starter caliber, you have a guy like Keldon Johnson, who would probably be a starter on a lot of teams, a guy who looks like, if he ends up being the 6th man, will absolutely be in the 6th man of the year conversations, because this is a dude that has put up 20 points a game in the season. And you have guys like Wesley and Castle, who just don't give you a break on defense, right? That's a big thing that the Spurs are going to be able to do this year. And we saw it, like, even with the finals team, the championship team, the Boston Celtics, their big thing was that everyone on their team could play defense. You have Derek White, well, you got a break from him, and now you got to go to Drew Holiday. And then you go to the bench, you got Peyton Pritchard terrorizing you. You got a guy like Sam Hauser. You just have constant guys going at you. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis in the paint. When you have all of these 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th lines of defense, where you don't allow the other team to ever get into a comfortable rhythm, that is one of the most important things I don't even know if it's one of the most important things, but it's one of those things that I would even say is kind of rare in basketball. And when you have it, it's something that a lot of teams have trouble game planning for. I mean, in a 7-game series, it's, I guess, a bit different than the regular season, but that's something the Spurs are showing right now. Not only this bench scoring that is coming from the San Antonio Spurs, all these bench guys who have been starters for the Spurs at a lot of points, like Champagnie looking like Steph Curry, Keldon Johnson, 20-point-per-game scorer, Tre Jones could have easily been the starter this year if they didn't get Chris Paul. All these guys are now coming off the bench and rolling the way they wanted to. And I mean, this is what we've been waiting for, right? We've been waiting for these young guys to take these leaps. And we've also been waiting for the roster to fill itself out so that these young guys, not all the pressure is on them. Now they can sit back and have those incredibly good bench roles that elevate the Spurs' long-term game, their longevity, I would say, throughout the season, when you don't have to rely on your stars for everything, even though a guy like Wemby will be relied upon a lot, and, you know, Vassell, guys like that, to have the ability to have a 20-point game from Keldon Johnson off the bench, to come in and be able to play Blake Wesley or Stephon Castle 25, 30 minutes if you have to, if there's an injury, or if they're rolling, or you need to do it for matchup purposes. That's what's getting these Spurs to the next level. I could go on for days and days, but I'll stop there, and I want to hear your guys' thoughts on everything I said down below. Because to me, this bench mob doing what they're doing right now is what we've all been waiting for San Antonio. I know we've been waiting on Victor Wembanyama, but to see the backups that are ready to fill into those footsteps is incredibly good. But that'll do it for this episode of Spurs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching. Really appreciate every single one of you that subscribed to this channel. I'm Josh Gosse, and I'll catch you in the next one.